30-28, Packers get the 49ers. And we are done with a long, long night of coverage from Levi Stadium. That's how it works with these primetime games. Just have to get used to it because the 49ers have a few more this season. But Aaron Rodgers yanks their heart out on that final drive to lead to the field goal that beats the 49ers. Wow. Where do we start? Well, I think a good spot to start is that the Packers controlled game flow for all 60 minutes. Yes, the 49ers did take a 28-27 lead late, but if we're going to be looking at this within the context of a full 17 game season and what the 49ers need to do to ensure that they're contenders throughout the entirety of that season, they can't rely on the formula that they showed against the Packers on Sunday night. Yes, Aaron Rodgers pulled a rabbit out of his hat, completed two passes to Devontae Adams. I'll have a lot to say in my harsh grade for the 49ers secondary about that later. And yes, you could probably assume that most quarterbacks wouldn't be able to do what Aaron Rodgers did in those final 37 seconds. But the 49ers, in my opinion, lost this game far before that happened, or even far before Jimmy Garoppolo led a 2-minute drill to take a 28-27 lead. It is a testament to the 49ers' talent and to their playmakers and to their mentality, their grit, whatever you want to call it, that they did come back and take that lead. But if we're talking about 17 game sustainability, you have to beat teams that you should beat on the lines of scrimmage. And the 49ers lost along both fronts against the Packers. And yes, Green Bay was a team that they should have beaten up front. The Packers are simply too injured and they've been too soft historically. The 49ers have already taken it to them in the trenches before with similar personnel. And this time the Packers were worse up front on paper. And the 49ers didn't do that. And Aaron Rodgers reminded everybody that games aren't played on paper. So it's about establishing game flow and control of that flow. And it's especially important for the 49ers because they're a play action based team and a team that plays complementary football because it relies so much on its pass rush. You see with how bad the secondary was yesterday. When you rely so much on the pass rush, you rely on keeping the defense fresh. 49ers didn't do that, so they left this to a toss up at best, desperation at worst. Even if it was desperation, that they almost, yes, did get it done with some clutch drives at the end of the game, but that is not a winning formula. And as we go through these grades, that's something we need to keep in mind. Jimmy Garoppolo was 25 of 40, 257 yards. There was good, yes. There was bad, yes. There was both. That's why I have him at a C plus. I didn't mind the Garoppolo interception. Jair Alexander made a hell of a play. Wasn't even his responsibility. 49ers needed to throw that deep pass to George Kittle to loosen up the defense. It might have actually worked because I think the Packers in that situation after that play, the 49ers offense shortly thereafter did get going. There was a little bit more space for Garoppolo to work with. Packers were gambling against the 49ers outside zone. So that was why that over the top throw came. You have to tip your cap to Jair Alexander for making that pick. Where you do have to criticize Garoppolo was the first 3rd and 1. George Kittle, crossing pattern, easy throw. Garoppolo completely misses him, almost throws an interception. And it's plays like that that just killed the 49ers yesterday. There are multiple plays like that killed the 49ers yesterday, but this was an easy one that Garoppolo could have gotten the offense into an easy rhythm early in the game, and perhaps this goes a whole different direction. If the 49ers offense hits that early game rhythm, they probably don't fall behind 17-0. So that early miss of George Kittle on a very short pass, I think, was more damaging than some of the more famous plays. Maybe even more damaging than an interception, that fumble late in the game. The interception, yes, the Packers did take it back in the 49ers territory, but the defense held on a goal line stand. It was the fumble at the end of the game that everybody wanted to zero in on. It looked terrible. Well, yeah, of course it wasn't a great play, but it was a more complicated play than people are making it out to be. Kenny Clark dominated the game for Green Bay on the inside. The 49ers interior line was terrible against the Packers, and Jimmy Garoppolo was running a screen pass. It was a play action screen pass. So takes his head away from the field of play to execute the fake, pulls his head back up, and Kenny Clark, all 320 pounds of him, is right in his lap. So there's a reason for why Garoppolo threw that ball backwards or fumbled. Is it a good reason? Maybe not. You can argue that, the quarterback in that situation just needs to instinctively react, eat the ball, and take the sack. But for people who think that it was inexplicable or, whatever word you want to use for it, no, there was a reason. It was that Laken Tomlinson got beaten way too quickly. He needed to hold off Kenny Clark a little bit longer. He didn't. Kenny Clark was in Garoppolo's lap, and it caused the fumble. Yes, bad play for Garoppolo, but it also illustrates the complex nature of things and how the 49ers just systematically failed at key junctures that prevented them from taking firm control of this football game. Garoppolo also forced a couple passes that shouldn't have been forced, that could have been intercepted. I thought Deebo Samuel had to play DB for him a couple times downfield. That wasn't good. But on the flip side, Garoppolo did a lot of good things. Finding Brandon Ayuk twice on that drive coming out of halftime was huge. Those are two excellent throws on third down. On the touchdown throw, creative arm angle from Garoppolo. Got it there around the free rusher. He perfectly diagnosed the blitz. The quick release came in handy. He hit Brandon Ayuk. The potential game-winning drive that wasn't, obviously, because Aaron Rodgers had his rebuttal. That also featured a couple clutch third down conversions. You had George Kittle over the middle in a play that reminded me a lot of the New Orleans Saints play from a couple years ago. This time he only dragged one guy instead of three. The use check play was good. That was Garoppolo's, it was one of the last reads on the play. You could tell he was going through his progressions. He finds Kyle Juszczyk, and Juszczyk scores. Is the criticism that the 49ers left too much time for Aaron Rodgers valid? In a game of Madden, yes, perhaps, but this is not a video game. And the 49ers, because they didn't have that firm control of game flow, because they didn't firmly control the line of scrimmage, it didn't feel like a sure thing that they were going to score on that final drive. And when you're in that mode, you take points when you can get them. You have to earn the right to just snap your finger and score when you want. The Packers had that right yesterday. Packers owned the line of scrimmage. They controlled game flow. It seemed like their offense could kind of go at its own pace when it wanted. The 49ers didn't have that. So I think points were points. The defense has to hold with 37 seconds left. So there are people trying to crucify Garoppolo for snapping the ball with 12 seconds left on the game clock. But I think a score was still far from guaranteed at the time. And I think it's Garoppolo's other mistakes, such as that missed throw of Kittle early in the game, such as some of those forces that killed 49ers drives, such as the fumble with Kenny Clark in his face. Even though that one wasn't fully his fault, it's still Garoppolo's mistake. It's the other mistakes that put the 49ers behind the eight ball to begin with and are the ones that we should focus on. But Jimmy Garoppolo is who Jimmy Garoppolo is. We know what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are. I mean, the strength is the quick release, generally the accuracy in the quick game. The weaknesses have been some of the longer throws, obviously, for Jimmy Garoppolo. And this game was interesting because he was on target with that longer throw to George Kittle, but Jair Alexander made a great play. But it was actually the short game that did the 49ers in. Garoppolo missed on that crosser to Kittle. He wasn't able to, at least just gracefully take a sack when Kenny Clark was in his face. It was the short game that derailed San Francisco. And that's a changeup, and that's emblematic of this maddening loss for the 49ers because so much went wrong on so many different levels. Garoppolo got hit 11 times. I mean, that adds more context into this whole performance. With the interior line as bad as it was, and we're going to get to that in a second when we grade these other positions, and with the run game not being able to be that branch or be that spine of the 49ers offense, that tree trunk that allows play action to branch off of it, it just wasn't a setup for sustainable success. So C plus is my grade for Jimmy Garoppolo. He has to be better early in the game, and that's going to be so important against Seattle because you don't want to fall behind anybody, but when you fall behind these really good quarterbacks, then they don't, they get a death grip on game control, and they're not going to let it go. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. Rodgers and the Packers might have relinquished the lead, but they never relinquished full control of the game, which is why they won at the end. So Garoppolo has to hit those early passes. That crosser to Kittle, it's traveling 3 or 4 yards in the air, but it kind of sails on him and bounces off Kittle's hands, is almost intercepted. It was just ugly. it's hard to establish a consistent run game when you don't establish those quick, consistent early passes. That goes back to Bill Walsh. I know the 49ers aren't technically a West Coast offense, but the same principles apply. That quick passing game gets established early. The run game can follow suit. It doesn't matter what order you do it in, but you need all those components for the offense to be cohesive. And my biggest problem with Jimmy Garoppolo was those early jitters or whatever they were, because he did turn it on and he did make clutch plays, but the 49ers have to get into their rhythm offensively earlier in the game so that they can control that flow. And ultimately, to me, that comes down to the energy that the quarterback is exuding. That's not to say that this was solely on Garoppolo, because there were so many players at fault in this game. At the running back position, the 49ers didn't have anybody that they seemed to trust, right? I mean, Raheem Mostert is done for the season. Elijah Mitchell, who was like the 1A for Raheem Mostert, is on the shelf right now. You could see why the 49ers tried so hard to wait it out and have Mitchell play, but that shoulder injury just proved to be too much. So they had to go to Trey Sermon, who had 10 carries for 31 yards. They had to hand off to George Kittle, hand off to Deebo Samuel, hand off to Brandon Ayuk. Help. They ran Kyle Juszczyk at quarterback on a surprise snap, and he ran up the middle. The first carry of the game was Juszczyk out of a normal running back position. Just goes to show you that Kyle Shanahan entered this game on very, very shaky ground as far as belief in his running backs unit. And he didn't even end up playing Kerryon Johnson, didn't even end up playing Jacques Patrick. Trenton Cannon had the nice kick return for the 49ers, but he didn't even end up taking a carry in the backfield. So Shanahan entered this game uncertain about his backs. Sermon, and unfortunately that, again, I'm going to rewind a little bit here. I don't want to blast Sermon before I know enough. But with the Packers really clamping down on the 49ers outside zone, the 49ers, I think, either needed to loosen that up by, hitting some of those easy short throws early on that Garoppolo missed, like the one to Kittle, or they needed extreme speed to get to the outside. And Raheem Mostert has that kind of extreme speed, right? I think Elijah Mitchell has 4.3 speed, and I think that we've seen his effectiveness on some of these outside zone runs. Unfortunately, I don't think that Trey Sermon has that speed. I mean, the 40 time does tell us a little bit about that. What was it, 4.6 or whatever? He has a fast burst, that first 10-yard burst. So at least in the measurable category, you would think he'd be able to burst it outside. But so far, Trey Sermon has not looked explosive enough to take advantage of what the 49ers need him to take advantage of. Now, that could be because there's still some indecisiveness. That's why the 49ers have him below Elijah Mitchell on the pecking order. It could be a combination of everything. Obviously, the 49ers blocking apparatus yesterday was not good. And we'll talk about this in the offensive line section. First pitch to the outside, Alex Mack gets blown up, and Kenny Clark, who's playing nose tackle, blows up Trey Sermon on the pitch. I mean, you pitch outside so that you get away from the nose tackles. And during my week of previews here on the YouTube channel, I talked about Kenny Clark being the one player the 49ers must account for, where they try to account for him with a pitch to Sermon, and either Sermon's not fast enough to get it outside, or Alex Mack just got so destroyed by Kenny Clark that it didn't matter. And I think the latter was more the truth on that play. But still, 10 carries, 31 yards won't do it. And then neither with the fact that Kyle Shanahan was relying on his receivers and tight ends and everybody else to run the football. 3.2 yards per carry did not form a good spine for the 49ers offense, which in turn meant that this team did not control game flow at all. And that was good news for Aaron Rodgers, who was armed by a consistent running game. They weren't explosive by any stretch. It was only 3.84 yards per carry for the Packers, but they were consistent behind Aaron Jones. And that is so necessary because a run game takes the steam out of a pass rush. You're just arguing with somebody on Twitter, way too analytically oriented. Oh, you need to do this to set up the play action, or you don't need a run to set up the play action. It's like, no, it's not about setting up the play action. It's about easing the burden off your offensive line. And you do that by successfully running the ball, because if you've ever lined up on defense, gotten in that three-point stance on the defensive line, you talk to anybody in the NFL and they'll say, if I have to worry about a run game, I'm not going to pass rush at full throttle. because you have to react a bit to a run game. You can't just go there with your hair on fire unless you take a huge gamble like Philadelphia's defense last week and the 49ers burned them with screen passes. But no, I mean, the Packers played a disciplined game up front, and the 49ers needed to establish some kind of run game to take the pressure off Jimmy Garoppolo. And they certainly didn't take the pressure off Garoppolo. He got hit 11 times. So the Packers didn't respect the run. They got after the quarterback. That's something that the 49ers have to change moving forward. The running backs, though, I mean, I just can't give them a high grade because I think a lot of the reason the 49ers weren't able to establish that run in the chicken and egg kind of scenario, was it the offensive line fault? Is it the running back's fault? Well, I think a lot of it was the running back's fault because you saw how Kyle Shanahan had to dig deep into his bag of tricks just to try to scheme some rushing production. That's how important it was to him. And that's how woefully deficient the 49ers running backs were in this game. The only position group for which I have a good grade for the 49ers are the receivers and tight ends. Kittle was running like a man out there. Deebo Samuel, grown man catches. Brandon Ayuk, grown man catches. Yeah, so much for the doghouse for Brandon Ayuk, right? Trent Sherfield had 2 snaps in this game. So is Trent Sherfield now in the doghouse too? I don't think so. I think the 49ers love Trent Sherfield. I think Brandon Ayuk has just worked his way back into a situation where he has rapport now with Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, on his touchdown catch, that throw was out before Ayuk even made his break. So it wasn't a perfect game for Ayuk. He dropped the pass in the red zone. Trey Lance made up for it with his touchdown right before the half, which, by the way, is exactly the way that I expected the 49ers to use Trey Lance. I don't know why they didn't do it more. I don't know why they punted from the 49-yard line. 3rd, 4th, and 1 in that situation. You would think that Trey Lance would be a good option, but still, Ayuk delivered in this game. Deebo Samuel delivered in this game. George Kittle delivered in this game. Mohamed Sanu delivered in this game. Drew a flag in the end zone at the end of the half. Made a catch of a bad Jimmy Garoppolo pass that should have been a bigger gain and almost was incomplete. But the 49ers targets, I think, were fine. I thought that they did a decent job blocking too. It's just that Green Bay played the game on their terms by shutting down the run. And the main reason they shut down the run wasn't the 49ers receivers. It was because that interior line for the 49ers just got worked. And that means it's a good time to go to the offensive line. D grade, I'm not going to fail them because they did some stuff well. Trent Williams shoved Eric Stokes into the end zone on that Trey Lance touchdown run. Mike McGlinchey had a couple nice run blocks. Laken Tomlinson had a decent run block. But boy, 4 pressures allowed by right guard Daniel Brunskill. Alex Mack, who'd been good through 2 games, had 1 highlight play who on the Lance touchdown where he got out and blocked on the perimeter. That was kind of a dream for the 49ers, right? The 2 free agents who signed in the same night blocking for Trey Lance to score the touchdown. That was all fine and dandy, but Mack got beaten in straight drop pass protection. He got beaten on a couple run blocks. It was not a good performance at the center position. Flashbacks to when the 49ers really struggled there in 2019 and 2020. Kenny Clark just had a monstrous game, and we go back to that first pitch of the game that really set the tone. Pitch right, Trey Sermon, you're trying to get away from Kenny Clark, but Alex Mack got so thoroughly beaten that Trey Sermon lost 5 yards due to Kenny Clark, who got the tackle for loss. I mean, that's just unacceptable. And Laken Tomlinson on the Jimmy Garoppolo fumble, he didn't hold off Kenny Clark long enough on the screen. So it was a one-man wrecking crew kind of game from Kenny Clark, and he beat all 3 of those guys up front. Laken Tomlinson, Alex Mack, and Daniel Brunskill. 49ers offensive line has to be better on the interior. There's no way around it. The NFL is one of those weird leagues. Stuff can change really quickly. Maybe they'll look great again in week 4 because they'll hit a couple plays early that'll give the 49ers interior line confidence, and they'll play the game downhill. But all I can do right now is grade Sunday's game against Green Bay, and the 49ers played the game uphill, and the interior offensive line struggled just as it had in the past, and I'm giving them a D because of it. 49ers defensive line, to me, it's a wash. This was an average performance. Aaron Rodgers got the ball out in less than 2.5 seconds on 18 of his 33 throws. He threw more quick stuff than he has ever in his career, which is no coincidence since he faced the 49ers in 2019 with Nick Bosa and company and was completely overwhelmed in both matchups. In fact, that first 2019 matchup, Aaron Rodgers averaged negative zero point 0.7 completed yards per attempt, which means his average completion fell behind the line of scrimmage. That's how quickly the 49ers were on him in that game. Well, the quick game, had to return and had to return with a vengeance for Green Bay in this one. And to be honest, the real problem in the 49ers defense was in the secondary. Rush and coverage have to work in tandem. The coverage has to hold long enough. They have to not interfere at key junctures to force, and then obviously the run game has to be stymied enough to force Aaron Rodgers into enough third and long situations to where that pass rush can really get to work, and Rodgers has to wait longer than 2 seconds in the pocket. That didn't happen all too often in this game. The Packers left behind receivers and tight ends to chip Nick Bosa. And they only did that because they believed that a limited amount of receivers and tight ends downfield could beat the 49ers secondary. And guess what? They were right. 49ers secondary wasn't good enough in this game. And that's an issue that we're going to discuss in a couple minutes when you see their grade. But I don't think that the pass rush had much to operate with in this one. They were completely overwhelming in 2019. And I think when Bosa's on the field, they still can be. But there's no more DeForest Buckner. Obviously, Javon Kinlaw is not nearly as good of a pass rusher. And Sansom Ebukam, I mean, if there's a weakness to this pass rush, Sansom Ebukam so far has been it. Sansom Ebukam needs to do a better job spelling Nick Bosa. The 49ers cannot afford to have Bosa out there for 100% of the snaps. No defensive line would be able to do that, especially a wide nine where the 49ers are getting after the quarterback. He's going to have some rests. Early on in the game, Nick Bosa was out for a few plays. Ebukam came in. Remember, they're working against Green Bay's third string left tackle on Josh Nijman. And Ebukam gets nothing, gets stonewalled. D Ford was getting stonewalled all game. That made more sense because he was working against right tackle. That was a starter in Billy Turner. So the matchup the 49ers needed to win consistently, regardless of whether or not Bosa was in the football game, was against left tackle, and they didn't do it. I mean, the depth on that defensive line has not been as impressive as we thought it could be. Will that change? Will they develop? Yeah, it could happen as the 49ers kind of round out into health. And remember, there's only 1/17 of the season. But for now, despite the fact that Bosa wrecked the game on the first drive, and despite the fact that, Eric Armstead had a nice sack, and I think the 49ers did what they could with Rodgers' quick release and the fact the secondary wasn't playing well behind them, they still did not get what they needed from their depth positions along the defensive line. And for that reason, that group gets a C. Linebackers, they get a C too. Fred Warner's pass interference was bad. That extended a Green Bay scoring drive that the 49ers couldn't afford. I thought Azeez Al-Shire made a couple nice tackles on Devontae Adams ahead of the first down marker down the sideline. And I thought Fred Warner made some nice plays, some nice tackles near the line of scrimmage. The pass interference was bad. It was one of many for the 49ers. And then obviously, how could it be higher than a C for Fred Warner when that ball from Rodgers to Devontae Adams on the winning field goal drive went right above his fingertips? It's too early to judge Warner and say, oh, hey, he wasn't worth that type of money. I mean, the guy's the quarterback of the defense. He's a great player. This was a tough loss for the 49ers. Aaron Rodgers got the best of them in that defense. Again, a lot of the defensive struggles go back to the offense not being able to pick up first downs early in this game, overexposing the defense. Remember that the defense did come through big. Goal line stop early in the game. It was 10-0 at that point, but the offense still couldn't turn that around into points of its own. And it made it 17-0. So it's one of those situations where it was a domino effect of stuff going bad for the 49ers. And the defense didn't help the cause at several junctures, but at some they did. But I call it a systematic failure because complementary football was not played and the line of scrimmage was not won. And that made everybody look worse, including the linebackers who get a C and including the defensive backs who get a D. But the reason the defensive backs are lower than linebackers and the defensive line is that I put more of the onus on the DBs in this game. In the game preview, I hammered this home. Green Bay was going to throw quick. This was no, secret. The Packers try to do this to get out of Dodge in 2019. 49ers still smothered them. But we knew that Rodgers, especially with a third string tackle, was going to try to get the football out quickly. So the 49ers had to be on their P's and Q's in that quick game. They obviously had to slow the run, and they didn't do that enough. But still, there was too much short game efficiency for Green Bay to stay on schedule, and then they would be able to burn the 49ers in the longer game. I mean, we saw it early with the throw to Lazard, 42-yarder. We saw a deeper pass to Valdez Scantling. Obviously, we saw Aaron Rodgers use Devontae Adams a ton in this game. He tore apart the 49ers, but constantly, and you even use Robert Tonyan over the middle to Fred Warner. Aaron Rodgers was matchup hunting throughout this game because he knew the 49ers defensive backs, or Warner in that one case, wouldn't turn around, wouldn't turn their heads, and would just kind of face guard on their way playing coverage downfield. And Aaron Rodgers found the matchup and drew the pass interference flag. It was just bad coverage from the 49ers, especially during a game that was fairly closely officiated. A lot of flags thrown in this game for tripping, for pass interference, you name it. The officials favored the offense in this football game. And the 49ers just didn't cover well enough. Now, Emmanuel Moseley did have a good return, so that saves the 49ers from a failed grade. He had one of the pass interference penalties that wasn't quite as bad as a couple of other ones, but he also broke up a pass from Rodgers to Devontae Adams late that kept the 49ers in this game, held the Packers to a field goal, made it 27-21. But the other guys, man, K'Wan Williams beat early, strained his calf. Josh Norman, just as a person, you have to hope that he's okay. Sounded like there might have been some internal bleeding, bruised lungs. That didn't sound good. He was quickly out of the game, which meant that Deommodore Lenoir was in the game and Dante Johnson was in the game, and Rodgers just picked mercilessly on those guys, right? Lenoir was beaten for a touchdown, committed a penalty. Dante Johnson wasn't looking for one of the passes to Devontae Adams on the side. Just ugly. The 49ers need more quality cornerbacks. I wonder if with C.J. Henderson, who was traded today from Jacksonville, 49ers didn't get him. I wonder if that's a matter of Trent Baalke not being willing to deal with the team operated by Jed York, who fired him a few years ago, because you would think the 49ers would have been interested in C.J. Henderson. You'd think they have to be interested in Richard Sherman, because a lot of those pass fits were just off, especially on that last drive. I mean, you can't let Devontae Adams be that open, and you would think that Sherman would throw a fit if that happened. First-year coordinator D'Amico Ryans, I'm sure a lot of it falls on him, not adjusting properly in game. That's why you kind of need that coach on the field figure, and that's why losing Jason Verrett hurts the 49ers even worse than it does just in the physical aspect. Hurts the 49ers in the cerebral aspect too. I mean, the coverages just weren't great. I mean, I just listed off the corners who had bad games. I thought Jimmy Ward played a decent game. He had the big hit that ended up being clean on Devontae Adams. He might be counted on to play cornerback if the 49ers can't sign anybody, but then there's going to be a hole at safety. So we'll see if they want to play Talanoa Hufanga at safety along with Jaquiski Tart, or I don't know what they do, but they don't have enough bodies after all these injuries are piling up. Drake Kirkpatrick is probably going to be active next week. All in all, it was an ugly performance. It was scorched earth against that secondary, between penalties and between Rodgers winning that game in that final drive. And they get a D, and they only avoid the failing grade because of a man named Emmanuel Moseley. And that was a good return for the 49ers. Now you pair Moseley with a capable veteran cornerback. I don't know if it's going to be Josh Norman returning, or Drake Kirkpatrick, or Richard Sherman signing with the team. However you do it, you got to get two guys that can maintain coverage integrity on the back end. And you have to live to fight another day. And if you live to fight another day and you do a decent job as a secondary, you're not atrocious like the 49ers were in this game against the Packers, then you give the pass rush a chance, because then Aaron Rodgers can't be throwing every 2 seconds. Then he has to take a little bit more time for guys to get open. And that's how rush and coverage work together. So 49ers pass rush needs more of a chance. I mean, it obviously wasn't perfect, but it was a little bit better than that secondary. And the defense as a whole, just a rough outing this game, with the overarching umbrella being that the offense can help them more. Again, systematic failure. 49ers across the board should share the blame in this loss. Special teams is good. Trenton Cannon, we could give the special teams an A. Trenton Cannon was good for the 49ers. That kick return, I thought they were good on kick coverage. Mitch Wishnowsky, all of a sudden, this guy's the best punter in football. Where did that come from? So, again, run through. C plus for the quarterback, D for the running backs, A minus for the wide receivers and tight ends, D for the offensive line. They've got to be better. C for the defensive line, C for the linebackers, and a D for the 49ers defensive backs. It's all connected. The 49ers have to play better complementary football, and we're going to talk about that a lot on the show this week. So make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure to listen to our Here's the Catch podcast. Make sure to check out this article, which is on The Athletic, where I talk about how the Packers chip blocked or used chips against Nick Bosa on their way to neutralize the 49ers pass rush, and they played the game on their terms. The 49ers must make sure that they play most of the next 14 games on their terms. And you have to play it downhill. And that starts with tying everything together. And it starts with converting first downs, moving the ball early in the game, something they didn't do in this one. You can't fall behind the 8 ball like they did and expect to win, although they almost did pull it out. So this is a talented team. There's some stuff to be happy about, but there's a lot to be concerned about as the 49ers move forward, and they have a chance to fix it next week against Seattle. All right, everybody, take care.